Hey y'all, thanks for stopping back again for episode 2 of I Bleeping Love Packaging. During this episode, I'm going to talk about my experience in the packaging industry. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been really awesome. It's great to see the momentum this is getting. And just a heads up, I have gotten some feedback that I'm talking a little fast. So I'm going to try to slow down a little bit. For the next episode also, I recorded that before getting this feedback. So just keep that in mind. I'm trying my best here. This is all new to me. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoy listening. Okay, so when we last left off, we were talking about my journey into packaging. But what about once I became a packaging engineer? My first packaging job actually took me to a place while I was still at RIT, the summer fall of my senior year at 3M in Minnesota. This was my first time away from home because if you remember in the first episode, RIT was only 15 minutes from where I grew up. So I loaded up my dad's old Hyundai Santa Fe that he sold to me, and the two of us drove from Rochester, New York, all the way to St. Paul, Minnesota, to my apartment that 3M had rented for me. I felt pretty lucky. 3M was covering the housing, and it was a fully furnished apartment, even included linens for the beds and bathrooms. What I didn't know was that St. Paul was the sleepy sister city to where all the other co-ops were staying, which was Minneapolis. For a bunch of reasons, I never really hung out with the other interns. Some of it being I was homesick, and some of it being I was in a different building than them in the 3M campus. And some of it was I was on a 6-month program where most of them were in a 3-month program. And some of it was I was just a bit more shy then than I am now. I did get to do a bunch of fun firsts while I was out in Minnesota. I went to my first NHL game with my dad. I went to 2 Twins games. And as a Rochester native, our baseball team, the Red Wings, is a feed team for the Twins. I was up in the nosebleeds for my first Twins game with one of my mentors from RIT, Chuck Lamb, who was visiting the area for a conference. And he snagged me and another 3M coworker of mine a couple of tickets. It's funny, at the end of that game, near the end of the night, the bugs were coming out. And I remember being pelted in the face with mosquitoes and just all these gnats that were trying to get to the scoreboard, which was right above our head. The second game that I went to, I was lucky enough to have my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, visiting, and a supplier took us all to a game. And we had really, really close to front row tickets, and it's probably the closest I'll ever get. Honestly, though, I think that those nosebleed seats were pretty great because I think you can see more of the game. And while I was at 3M, I worked on a bunch of different projects. I researched lightweighting buckets, I helped to redesign packaging for computer mice, and even came up with some cool concepts for toilet wand packaging, which I know doesn't sound very exciting, but it was cool for an intern. I did do my fair share of, quote, intern work, a lot of SAP data entry, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I spent all day in the dynamics lab doing drop tests, which is in the basement of this other building. To run those tests, I needed to make my own corrugated boxes. And unless I was able to order them weeks in advance, I had to make them by hand. This meant that I needed to use the massive, ancient manual slitter slaughter machine that was in the basement of the building. For the uninitiated, a slitter slaughter is how an RSC, or a regular slotted container, which is your typical brown cardboard box, that's how it's made. On this machine, you have to take a chuck key and manually set the distance for each cut and crease wheel, feeding your corrugate sheet material through this massive machine by a huge wheel by hand. Then measure and cut your slots and turn it into a box. It was huge. It was a cumbersome machine. And I wish I took a picture of it while I was there. I called it the bomb shelter. This massive machine. I think it was from like the 20s. The other wild project I worked on when I was there was to ensure all the dangerous goods specifications were correct when loading them into SAP. Dangerous goods are anything that are explosive or corrosive. So why they felt that was a good idea to give to the intern, I'll never know. But the best part about 3M was meeting Laszlo. So huge shout out to Laszlo. I know last episode I shouted out Mr. G. This episode, huge shout out to Laszlo, who was my RDOS CAD mentor and taught me a ton about RDOS CAD and how to draw with parametrics. I was lucky enough to run into Laz at ESCO World a couple of years ago, which is ESCO's big conference that they ran. It was in Florida a couple of years ago. And it was great to show him how far I've come from his foundation that he gave me back in 2013 until now. Post co-op, the rest of senior year was actually just one semester. And since I had front loaded all of my core classes, I just needed to do some final electives and some fluff. So my senior year, I took classes like Wines of the World, Foods of the World, Archery. It was a pretty great way to end my time at RIT before graduating and landing my first real job at Hasbro. But I didn't have that job lined up on graduation day. Most of my friends were chatting about where they were going to go and where they're going to head off to next. And honestly, I wasn't sure yet. I was worried. I had had an interview at Honda in Ohio, and I felt good about it, but I didn't know if it was right for me. My wife, who again is my girlfriend at the time, was in grad school, and I didn't really want to make that big of a commitment to move somewhere full time. And my career advisor told me about a temp opening in Rhode Island for Hasbro. It was only a 6-month contract with the possibility of an extension to 12 months. So I jumped at the chance. I remember my interview. It was at my mom's house. And Robin, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but it was at my family room on the board game table, which is basically just a high top table in the corner that we used to play Monopoly on. And I had a dress shirt on and gym shorts for my Zoom call. I do not recommend doing that. My pants were in the wash and I was scrambling to make sure that I could make the Zoom call in time. But I landed the job. And in 3 weeks, I had to find an apartment that would let me rent month to month and that didn't cost too much and that wasn't in a sketchy part of town. So I hit up Craigslist, which is what you did at the time. And my grandpa and I drove out to Rhode Island for the weekend and did a tour of a bunch of apartments. I'm going to preface this part of the story with my grandpa is like the most amazing, personable human, but like most people of his generation, leans a little bit more conservative in his values than maybe some of us younger folk. During one of the apartment tours, I guess the landlord didn't give the tenants enough notification or they just didn't care. But the way the apartment was set up is when you walked in the door, you walked right into the bedroom. So the landlord knocked and we hear a voice say, "Come in." And the first thing my grandpa sees as he enters the room is two women in bed together, fully clothed, mind you, but laying there watching TV. And I thought this poor man was going to have a heart attack. Long story short, I did not lease that apartment. I did find another one that was this really nice, sweet lady who let me rent basically the third story of her house. And it was this attic. I could barely stand up straight in it, but it was month to month. It was cheap. It was in a good part of town. And she knew that I could extend out to a year if I absolutely needed to. Okay, so back to work. One of my first brands at Hasbro was Equestria Girls, which was an anthropomorphic line of My Little Pony dolls that Hasbro basically made to show Disney that they could make dolls and try to steal the Disney Princess line from Mattel, which they successfully did for a little bit, and then Mattel took it back. I was lucky to work on it because it was a line that had a Comic-Con exclusive item, which is the holy grail of items for a packaging engineer in the toy industry. You get a near unlimited budget, and there is not a retailer restriction on the size or the shape or anything. So for the most part, it's adults who buy these items at Comic-Con because they're the ones who go to Comic-Con and they have extra money to spend. So this was my first big chance to show people what I could do. You know, I had infinite budget and I needed inspiration. So I jumped on Google like any good designer and I put into Google, I quote, "My Little Pony adult toys," not thinking about the ramifications of my Google search. I've never closed out a tab so fast at work in my whole life. I've seen my fair share of brony stuff. You know, having been at RIT, which if you know, it's a very nerdy, weird culture at RIT. I've seen my fair share of brony stuff, but that search is seared into my brain for eternity. The next year at Hasbro, I was able to also work on my very first brand from the ground up, Yokai Watch. If you're unfamiliar, it's a Japanese cartoon. I wouldn't call it an anime. It's just not that style. But, you know, if I'm wrong, hit me in the comments. It's about a kid named Nate in the US who tries to befriend a ghost or a yokai and earn their medals. It's kind of Pokemon-ish, but less battling and more questing and problem solving. That was another brand that had a Comic-Con item. We made this really cool jewelry box that was inspired by this like Japanese jewelry box that we found. It was a setup box with foam inlay in the lid to hold these 5 medals. There's a nice matte black blister to hold the yokai figure. And I was lucky enough that year to get sent to Comic-Con to work the toy booth selling that very box that I made. I was sweaty. I made a headband out of my t-shirt because it was just so hot and we're like slinging boxes left and right. Word got out that the package engineer who made Yokai Watch was at the booth. And then I ended up signing about 24 boxes, including a couple for Nintendo America, which they gave out at their booth celebrating the release of their DS game. I actually found one of these boxes later on eBay, and I was sad to see that it ended up selling for less than the retail price. I guess my signature didn't add as much value as I hope it did. I got a chance to work on a ton of different brands at Hasbro, and next week I chat with Mario, who was the graphic designer on Transformers, about my time on that brand and some of the cool stuff that we made together. So I'm going to skip over that for now, and I'll wrap up with my time at Hasbro with this. I loved Hasbro. I learned a ton about package design and engineering there. I made a bunch of friends that I still consider to be my family, and for a long time, I thought it was going to be the only place that ever worked. But after 7 years and a bit of stagnation in my role, I was itching to try something new. The world was barely opening back up from COVID in May of 2022, and I decided it was time for me to spread my wings and fly on up to New Hampshire to NEMO Equipment, which, mind you, is a 2-hour drive from Rhode Island, not that far. NEMO is an outdoor company based in Dover, New Hampshire, which is famous for its tents, sleeping bags, and camping chairs, as well as other outdoor equipment. This was a hard depart from the toy and games that I was used to, but I figured I could handle it. They were a much smaller company where Hasbro employed thousands of people, and had a team at the time of over a dozen packaging engineers. NEMO was just over 50 people total, and I was their only packaging engineer and basically their only packaging hire. I still had most of the same tools that I had at Hasbro, which is SolidWorks, ArtioCAD, and I had a really great graphic designer, but I felt lost. I would bring ideas to the table only for them to be shot down, or at least not have the support that I thought that they deserved. New cost reduction ideas for their foam pad, a different way to merchandise their inflatable sleeping pads, a new storage system for their sleeping bag, packaging supplier consolidation, a new e-commerce bundle, all seemed to go nowhere. And to be fair, I don't think this was a NEMO fault. I think this came from a lack of solo experience from me and not having deep packaging knowledge before breaking into a solo career. See, at Hasbro, we had a team for everything. We had a team for packaging structure, a team for branding, a team for graphic production, a team for sourcing, a point of production display, sustainability, cost, etc. At NEMO, I wasn't like a one-man band, but I had a lot more to juggle than I was used to. I got overwhelmed. Even with a lighter workload from a SKU count perspective than Hasbro, I just didn't know what I was doing. Looking back, I was probably doing fine, but I was just so used to the constant pressure from Hasbro and being so specific on die line creation that I felt like I was being paid too much at NEMO to do too little. And it made me worried for my job. That mixed with the fact that after selling our house in Rhode Island, we couldn't get an offer to stick on anything in New Hampshire. So I ended up driving back and forth from my in-laws' house in Utica, New York every other week, renting a hotel, and I missed my wife. There was actually one week where I only had to be up there for a couple of days, and I figured, well, I work for a camping company. I might as well use some of this gear. So instead of getting a hotel that week, I got a campsite, and I set up my tent, and I went to the office, and before coming back to crash for the night, I stopped at Market Basket and picked up a rotisserie chicken and a 6-pack of PBR and ate that chicken right out of the bag over the campfire like a rat. And I just thought to myself, what am I doing with my life? So after 10 months on that job, I gave my 2 weeks notice and I landed my job at Lovevery, where I was able to work fully remote. I had 2 weeks left of NEMO, and then I had 2 weeks after that before I started at Lovevery. I gave basically 4 weeks notice for myself. My wife and I were still staying in the in-law apartment at my in-law's house, and if I was going to be working remote, I wanted to have an office. The only problem was there was really no room for one. The only available space was a 6-foot by 4-foot closet on the south side of the house, and it had peeling wallpaper, holes in the wall from where the studs were looked for unsuccessfully, and peel and stick tile that had kind of lost its stick. I took those 2 weeks to quickly whip up the closet into shape, smoothing out the walls, painting, putting in the floor, adding a window AC unit because at least it had a window. And honestly, I kind of miss that little office these days. Currently recording this in the basement of my house, which is my current home office, and I have zero natural light. That little office closet, even though I could spread my arms out and touch the walls, and if you ask anybody at Lovevery, they've seen me do it, it got me started and I kind of miss it. Anyways, this part's going to be a little hard because up until the week before this recording, this is being recorded just as a heads up in the first week in February, I was employed by Lovevery. I was recently laid off, which is kind of where the inspiration came to start this podcast. So this is my last section. This is all about Lovevery. So I get my office set up and I'm ready to go to start Lovevery. And I was so damn glad to be back in the toy and games world. I can totally design other kinds of packaging. That's not a problem, but there's something magical about toy and games. But this was a different kind of toy and games packaging than I had ever worked on before. And it focused more on direct-to-consumer packaging than the retail experience. And Lovevery does have multiple retail lines of product, but the main driver of the business is its subscription kits. Much of my role was now in cost reduction. And I thought that I was pretty good at it, and I was finding ways to increase container efficiency by as much as 300%. Looking at you, Buddy Stroller Redesign. Even on new product development, I was able to take skills from Hasbro and apply them to products at Lovevery, building new rebuildable standards in ArtioCAD to reduce development time, creating reporting tools for quicker quoting, and helping with a Walmart launch to ensure we met all of Walmart's crazy shelf requirements on the first try. My first big launch was the reading skill set, consisting of roughly 20 products plus books broken across 3 large bundles. I didn't work on all of these products, but I did work on a good chunk of them and came up with the term that we used to describe the unboxing experience, which was called layer caking. See, for these kits, it was important to progress through them in a certain order. And we did a ton of packaging testing to ensure customers understood when to use each product. We tried colors, numbers, patterns, a map, you name it. And each time they would take everything out of the larger shipper box and lay it all out on the table, and they would just start to open stuff. Hence, the layer cake was born. It wasn't cheap. It actually was the most expensive way to guide the customer, but it worked and it slowed them down. It turned the packaging into more than just a box. It made it an integral part of the product. That actually allowed me to get sent over to Hong Kong and then to China for the first time, where we did a factory line review. And I would love to tell you that the packaging worked on the first try, and then we all high-fived and got drinks and went home early. There was one night where a bunch of us actually went out for a foot massage, or at least that's what we thought we signed up for. Imagine walking into a massage parlor with 5 of your coworkers, both men and women, and being told to put on scrubs, which for me, as a big guy, they didn't fit. I was like an overstuffed sausage in these scrubs. And walking into what essentially is a small movie theater with 6 massage chairs. Only, here's the kicker. None of us spoke Mandarin, and none of the people at the massage place spoke English. We did all of our talking through rudimentary hand signals, bad translation apps, and by calling our suppliers and having them translate for us. Everything started off normal enough. We took off our shoes and our socks, and the only movie they could find to put on the screen in English was The Equalizer, which I know is super relaxing. And I had my eyes closed and was pretty much disassociating with everything until I hear in my ear an automated voice go, "It is time to take off your shirt." Excuse me? No, I'm okay. And I wave off the masseuse, but she points to her phone again, and it says this time, "You must take your shirt off." This is weird. So I yell back to my coworker, Jake. I go, "Hey, Jake, do you have your shirt off?" And all I hear back is, "Hell yeah, brother." Evidently, we got mixed up at the counter, and instead of just getting foot massages, all 6 of us ended up getting signed up for full body massages. Then this woman starts to dig into my back with the force of a linebacker. So I put into my phone, I'm scrambling, and I type into my phone what I think just says softer, and I hit enter, and something gets said in Mandarin. And she sighs and she pushes harder into my back. I'm like, what the heck? So I point again and I retype into my phone, and she just sighs again and pushes even harder. And so I gave up and I just winced through the pain, and I can hear all the bones in my back pop in ways that I've never heard before. And the next day I get up and like my back is sore, and I look in the mirror and it is bruised. The whole thing is black and blue. I have a picture on my phone. If you ever run into me and you're like, "AJ, I heard on the podcast that your back is all black and blue," like, I'll show you the picture. It's weird, but I'll do it. So the next day I showed my phone to my coworker from the Hong Kong office, and I typed in what I had typed at the time, and he starts to laugh. And I'm like, what is so funny? Basically, what the translation app interpreted was my pleas for going softer spit out some sort of character that basically meant, because I'm a big guy, that my body is soft, which meant that her pushing wasn't hard enough. Anyways, I installed the app. I never used it again. Back to the packaging. On the very first drop of the ISTA test of this box, the box exploded. I don't mean dented. I mean, it catastrophically ruptured. The product spilled all over the floor. Luckily, the supplier that we were working with was amazing, and they had a great package engineering team. And while I don't speak Mandarin, I do speak via die line. And we worked together to find a great solution with some cool corner supports, some extra tape, and we beefed up the glue seam. And man, I really hope I get to work with this supplier again in the future, because they are just fantastic. But my time at Lovevery's come to an end, and I'm excited to see where the packaging industry takes me. I know that toy and games industry right now is kind of in a big shakeup, so I probably take a break from that. But the foundation of what I have from Hasbro, my solo learnings from NEMO, and the supplier interactions from Lovevery have built me up to be the package engineer that I am today. Hopefully someone will see those as a benefit and scoop me up, and I can do a part 3 with a job update soon. But until then, I'm going to keep searching, and I can't wait to find my next chapter. So if you made it to the end of this, thank you. I appreciate all the support you've shown me so far, and for I Bleeping Love Packaging. And I can tell that so many of you bleeping love packaging too. If you want to be a guest on the show, drop me a message on LinkedIn or search for AJ Piejko-Brown. That's Piejko-Brown, just like the color. Or send me an email to ibleepinglovepackaging@gmail.com. I would love to have you on the show and share your packaging story. I'm stoked to have Mario's story be our next episode, because the guy is awesome and he is just like the best guest. He's my total counterpart. Like, I'm a spazzball, Mario's cool, calm, and collected. And I have a couple of great guests lined up after his, but I could always use more guests. So again, thank you for listening. Be sure to drop a comment on Spotify or to share this podcast and give it a 5-star rating, and I would be like super appreciated. Until next time, thank you.